La Fille Carabosse ou le Poignard Fatal, translating literally as The Fairy Carabosse or The Fatal Poignard, and released as The Witch in English, is a French fantasy/horror comedy trick film written, directed, and edited by Georges Méliès. Released in 1906, it also possibly stars Méliès as the evil fairy Carabosse, with the rest of the cast going unidentified, as was typical for the time. At just over 12 minutes, it's silent, and I would classify it as appropriate for all audiences. In fact, I would classify this as a children's film. This film was not born from a purely creative place for Georges Méliès, who sometimes struggled to secure funding for his work at all. While he certainly poured effort into The Witch, it actually began as a commission for the Grand Magasin du Fayel department store in Paris, France. Highly successful, the store featured an adjoining screening room where customers could leave their children to be distracted by fantasy trick films, which were projected on a screen with musical or spoken accompaniment. These films went over so well with their child audiences that parents were reported as having to struggle to get their kids to leave once their errands were done. The Witch drew from several sources, starting with the 1697 French fairy tale The Princess Mayblossom by Madame Dunois, which features a fairy named Carabosse who curses the daughter of a king to 20 years of misery as revenge for a prank he played on her as a child. It was also influenced by Breton folklore, traditional concepts of fairies, and French fairy plays, a genre of theater that was very popular in 19th century France due to its fantasy stories and lavish sets, costumes, special effects, and music. I go over fairy plays in a bit more detail in my video reviewing The Merry Frolics of Satan, so be sure to check that out if you're curious. The Witch was filmed at Méliès' home studio in Montreal, France, and was released by his production company, Star Film Company. Méliès would have also worked, at least in part, on the sets, costumes, and special effects for the film, the latter of which included things like substitution splices, pyrotechnics, stage machinery, and dissolves. Additionally, the film would have been hand-painted frame by frame by the film colorists at Tuilier's studio. An impoverished troubadour visits a fairy's lair to request insight into his future, and is shown the image of a princess imprisoned in a dungeon. The fairy warns him that rescuing the princess will be no easy feat, and offers him a magical four-leaf clover to protect him on his adventure. Unable to afford it, the troubadour tricks her, giving her a bag of sand that he claims to be full of gold. Enraged when she realizes his deception, the fairy vows revenge and chases after him as he journeys through a haunted cemetery and faces the monsters that are guarding the princess's cell. I am, I think, understandably, very skeptical of any film that begins as a commission for a business, whether it's to sell a product or be played in a commercial space. So I initially went into this movie with some reservations, but I have to say, The Witch is quite cute, and Méliès still clearly poured a lot of creative intention into it. It's definitely geared towards children, with its horror elements being very subdued, which is fine. Now, the plot is the film's weak point. It's very light, even for a short kids' film, telling a standard fairy tale about a poor man tricking a magical being and saving a princess. As a result, the characters are stock. The Witch is very fun, if cliché, but there's really nothing to anyone else, except I guess the fact that the troubadour is a little bit clever and brave. The princess is literally just a warm body, to be honest. Still, the performances are solid. Méliès, or whoever it was playing Carabosse, is the highlight. They're so lively and silly in just the right way for a silent children's film, with a lot of exaggerated physical gestures and nefariousness. The troubadour matches the witch's energy pretty well, though he's definitely less funny, and I love the people playing the snakes. They're great. The druid and princess are just kind of there, but their actors clearly weren't asked to do very much. The best features of this film, as is my common refrain regarding a lot of trick films are its technical ones. The sets are well painted, detailed, and diverse, and I think the film really uses them well to create a sense that the troubadour is traveling a sizable distance. The costumes are also pretty good, especially the detail and the fabric work on the troubadour's outfit and his cute little shoes. The effects are not Méliès's most elaborate or exceptional, but they're still engaging and they're pretty fun. The hand coloring is vibrant and the ghosts look suitably transparent. The monsters, especially the big frog and the fire-breathing dragon, are really delightful, and the witch's flying is the highlight of the film. I love how they used a rolling backdrop to create the illusion of her flight. It's amazing. Look at her go. Overall, The Witch is not revolutionary, and the story is extremely simple. But I enjoyed myself, and it doesn't wear out its welcome at under 13 minutes. I am going to give The Witch a 3 out of 5. I recommend it to anyone who likes children's fairy tales. It's definitely a good film for little kids. The Secret de Loire Logère, released as The Clockmaker's Secret in English, is a French occult trick film directed by Gaston Velle with cinematography by Segundo de Chaumont. Released in 1907, its writer is unknown, as are its actors. At 10.5 minutes, it's silent, and I would classify it as appropriate for ages 8 years old and up due to some mildly frightening themes. I have not been able to find any information about the production of this film, except that it was produced by Pathé Frères and was thus presumably shot in France. It's also quite clear that this film was inspired by the German legend of Faust, with how it portrays a man selling his soul to a devil figure in exchange for worldly gain. I talk a little bit more about Faust as a legend and its place in early film history in my review of The Damnation of Faust, but suffice it to say this is far from the first take on the tale, which is fairly unsurprising, because as I've mentioned in the past, the director Gaston Velle was often hired by Georges Méliès to make films that would compete with those of Georges Méliès. When a town holds a competition for its residents to design the new town clock, the devil appears to offer an elderly clockmaker a dark deal, a winning design impossible for human hands to make in exchange for the clockmaker's soul. Though the man resists at first, he ultimately succumbs to temptation, leaving his religious daughter to fight for his soul as he loses his mind. As I mentioned, Gaston Velle is largely remembered for having been hired by Georges Méliès to mimic Georges Méliès' style and compete with him in the growing film market. Though Velle was a productive director in his own right, with over 90 films to his name, he is often seen as derivative, and that's not entirely unfounded. He was very much a director for hire a lot of the time, and many of his films don't really bear a signature style or air of creativity as a result. But I am actually going to argue that this is not the case for The Clockmaker's Secret. Yes, it is based off of a story that Méliès himself had already adapted several times. And yes, the film exhibits a few special effects that are clearly aping Méliès's. But the overall tone of the film is starkly different, not only from Méliès's work, but from a lot of its contemporaries. Films from this time period tended to lean into comedy a lot, due to their brevity, the fact they were often shown at more whimsical events like carnivals, and the need for exaggerated movement and expression from their actors to convey emotion. This movie bucks that trend quite a bit. There are a few instances of overemphasized performances and a little bit of whimsy at points, but overall its tone is pretty somber and its characters are fairly subdued. The plot isn't terribly original as an adaptation of Faust, but this tonal difference makes it stand out, and there are fresh bits that have been added, like the clockmaker's protective daughter and the way he battles with madness after signing away his soul. Now, at first glance, what spurs the clockmaker to make that decision might seem in itself a little bit comedic, a little bit silly, a competition-winning clock. But it's obviously more about what the clock represents: success in his field, material gain, and the admiration of his peers. It's fairly believable, especially as a metaphor for the seemingly trivial things for which people are willing to compromise themselves. The performances are solid, though the poor quality of the print we have sometimes makes it a bit difficult to read everyone's faces. The devil is suitably dastardly, though less campy than in many of Méliès' films, and the Clockmaker's actor gives a pretty grounded performance for the time. You can sense his internal conflict and later mental decline in the wake of his mistake. There's a bit where he has a breakdown in a pub after encountering a watch that especially works quite well. It might be my favorite scene in the film, actually. On a technical level, while it's not the strongest of its era, it's got a lot going for it. The painted backdrops of the sets are just great, with some really wonderful level of depth and detail work. In the pub, for example, you can see they even painted rays of sunlight streaming in through a window. The costumes are also really good, very layered and diverse, with a lot of variation amongst the human characters. The devil's outfit even changes, becoming more elaborate as his plans come to fruition, and the demons that accompany him have this fun clock-themed costuming going on, with my favorite being those of the clockmen. They are so good, their pendulums even move, I love them. Finally, the special effects are pretty competent. There's some smooth dissolves, pyrotechnics, and simple stage mechanics. Nothing groundbreaking, but used well and with clear purpose to enhance the story. Overall, with all this in mind, I am going to give The Clockmaker's Secret a 3.5 out of 5. It's an interesting tonal departure from the overt comedy that pervaded early 1900s horror, as well as a decent, if lower stakes, take on the Faust legend. I would most recommend it to fans of theater, early cinema, and Faustian bargain tales. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be very appreciated. You can find my other reviews on this channel, starting all the way back with my review of the first horror film ever made in 1896. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, Letterboxd, and Instagram at Under the Fleapit. If you like what I do and want to support the channel, my Ko-fi donation page and Patreon will both be linked in the description of this video. Until next time, this has been Under the Fleapit. Stay spooky!